So Ginny asked last time about how many horses were killed during the war. And so it turns out that there were 8 million horses, donkeys, and mules that died during the war. Um, 500 to 1,000 arrived daily to France from various parts of the world, including the United States, who sent over 1 million themselves,
Hmm.
not all at
Hmm.
once, obviously. Um, and Ginny mentioned the movie War Horse by Spielberg, which is good. It's actually based on an account by the owner of the War Horse. It's called Warrior, and according to the reviews, it's actually the horse is more spectacular than even Spielberg makes out in the movie. So
Is Warrior a film, a PBS, or what?
there is a documentary about it as well, but it's the title of the book, the
Okay,
memoir
got it.
written by Seeley, Seely.
Okay,
I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm going to.
okay.
Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, no, that was great because I went and looked that up right away, and it was shocking. 8 million. That's a lot of animals to lose their lives.
Hmm.
So starting tonight, I thought I'd kick off
Oh,
with a picture of Maisie Dobbs' 1927 MG 1440 car that Lady Rowan owned and gave to her to drive around in the second half of the book. This is what that car looks like. That's actually a 1927 MG 1440 little roadster two-seater.
wow,
I thought that was a pretty snappy little car. So
wow.
I thought I would give everybody a glance at that to start off the evening. And then I was going to
It's
talk a little bit about
interesting.
Maurice.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
No, go
Uh,
ahead.
I
I was
just
going to talk a
just
little bit
thought it
about
was
Maurice Blanche. So, in reading, since it's our last night, Sherlock Holmes in his stories was pretty much self taught. He was a scientist, a chemist. He learned experiments on his own, sort of learned his own craft and realized how great he was. And of course, Hercule Poirot spent many, many years as a detective in Belgium and gathered a great reputation that, once his book started, he was retired at that point, but was assisting everybody. But he had a background in law. And then you have Maisie Dobbs, who comes along, who's a scullery maid, in a house at the age of 13. And thanks to Lady Rowan, who starts her education process, and Maurice Blanche, who takes that process and works with her, she ends up becoming a, investigator psychologist. So throughout the book, and if you continue to read Maisie Dobbs, I'm on 16 now with only 2 more left, one not published yet. Maurice's words of wisdom will continue throughout the books, and you learn more about him, of course, as the books go on because he's involved. But I thought I'd just touch on some of the words of wisdom that he shared, because I think she's very much shaped by Maurice being somebody extremely important in her life and shapes how she goes about solving cases. So we have, first of all, his words were, "You must write it down, absolutely, and in its entirety, write it down." Everything she does. So she does her little cards where she writes things down. And of course, they also do their little maps on the pieces of wallpaper where they use crayons to connect ideas. Extraordinary, I did this one last week, but I love this quote: "Extraordinary hides behind the camouflage of ordinary. Assume nothing." So when you're looking at things, never ask a question following a story. So when somebody's telling you something, let that settle and don't jump on them with a question right away. Coincidence is a messenger sent by truth. And this one appears in a lot of the books. It's
Hmm.
something interesting to think about, that coincidence is a messenger sent by truth. We all have our masks, which of course, talking about last week with the masks on all the men whose faces were disfigured. And of course, that plays a huge part as we get to the end of this book. But Maurice saying we all have our masks. Pay attention to the reactions of your body. Be aware of concern, of anticipation, of all the feelings that come from the self. They manifest in the body. What is the cause? And I think you'll see a lot of that with Maisie. One of the things she does, I don't know if you picked up on this as you read the books, everybody to think about, but how she mirrors the body image of people when she's talking to them. She stands as they stand, move as they move, and she really tries to bring the physical into helping her understand the mental of what's going on. Truth comes to us as individuals so that we might have a more intimate encounter with the self. what is there in your heart that needs to be given light and understanding when you're worried or thinking about something? And then, of course, the last part that she does in every book from Maurice is the importance of a final accounting, of pulling everything together and looking at all aspects of it. And not that you just solved the crime, like who's the murderer, who did whatever, but that you get everybody that's been involved on a better path by the time they're finished. And that's very important as you go on in the Maisie Dobb books to her, not to just get an answer when you hire her. It's not just, I got to know who did this. You've got to, everything has to work out for everybody. And of course, one of the other things Maurice did, right, when he was talking about last week, we mentioned that Kierkegaard quote. He gave her a journal and said to keep a journal every day, you know, and write down things. So I feel like there's a lot of good words of wisdom there with Maurice Blanche. So I wanted to just sort of start with those thoughts. And then we're going to jump to Peter is going to present a poem for us from World War One.
One thing that I wanted to mention is there's actually a book called What Would Maisie Say? And I gave it to a friend at Christmas, and she's, she says, "My God, I mean, like you can live by these,
You can. There are great
yeah.
words of wisdom in it.
Yeah. So anyway, because we were talking so much about World War One last week, I decided that we ought to look at one of the best, in my mind, poems by World War One poet, and that is Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. I taught it occasionally at GA, and I definitely taught another one of his poems, Dulce est decorum est. I'm relying on my former students, particularly, to embrace the poem and to show me that they have not forgotten everything that I taught them. So I'm going to give you a few hints. When I would teach this poem, it would take 1 or 2 periods. There's so much there. So we're going to streamline it. I should mention that the title of the poem was suggested by Siegfried Sassoon, another great World War I poet. And I should also mention, just in passing, that I got so much into this poem and other World War I poets that I'd like to offer one of these courses on World War I poetry if anyone is interested. And I've gotten some support from my, from my good friends here. So here's the thing. I want you to think about the following as I read. The form of the poem, simile, personification, alliteration, onomatopoeia, irony, and the big prize would go to Volta. Okay, so I know who you are. I mean, I know who the former students are. So I'll be looking for some responses as I read. Okay. Anthem for Doomed Youth. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning, save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Okay, clearly we see the connections with Maisie here. What kind of poem is this?
Just for a question, Peter, did he survive the war? Was this a soldier
No,
that
no,
wrote this?
he died a week before the armistice.
Okay.
Yeah.
In
Some of his compatriots did, like
Right.
Siegfried Sassoon, yeah. How many lines does this poem have?
Fourteen.
15?
14.
14.
And what does that mean?
A sonnet.
Excellent. Excellent. Got the table set. That's the first one. First. Okay. So this is a sonnet. Wonderful form of poetry. I love sonnets. Shakespeare wrote a hell of a lot of them. Petrarch is known for them. And this is kind of a hybrid. This is between Petrarch and Shakespearean, because look at the rhyme scheme. It's A B A B C D C D E F F E G G. So what it's divided into two sections, right? You've got the first 8, which in Petrarch is called the first 8. Starts with an O.
Something. Octet. Or something.
Yes, thank you. It's the octet.
Yay!
And the second 6 are the
Sextet.
sestet. Excellent. Okay. So there's a reason for that. And the reason partially comes with that mysterious word volta. Look at the first 8 and look at the second 6. What happens between the first 8 and the second 6?
Well, the tone changes.
How so, Beth?
It goes from well, a lot of onomatopoeia and
yes.
death and pain and bad stuff going on, and then it turns into more of like a requiem for those who are dying or perhaps about to die.
Excellent. Okay. And so what the volta is a shift. It's the shift in the sonnet. Which, and it's in a way, it's the second part of the poem answering or responding to the first part. So we'll get to the other devices in a moment. But how would you describe Wilfred Owen's attitude here in the poem? It's kind of a tonal question. And Beth has pointed out that there is a shift.
Almost disgust.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying he's disgusted with but what I didn't quite get the answer. Was Wilfred Owen a soldier?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes,
In the
he
trenches.
was.
In the
All right,
trenches.
He was in the trenches. All right.
He was an officer, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a disgust aimed at the people who got them into this mess.
Ah, okay, okay. At the time of a lot of the World War I poems, there were a lot of sort of jingoistic poems that were written in support of the war. Most of them, quite ironically, were not written by soldiers. But Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen were soldiers, as were a number of other World War One poets. So I think, yeah,
Correct.
I think you've nailed it there in terms of he's criticizing those who have sent these boys to the war, to wars. Other comments?
Is it these guys, as you say, they're in the trenches, and I'm not sure it's necessarily, and this is based on other stuff, but if you've ever read, the All Quiet on the Western Front,
Mhm.
I can't think of his name. He was in the
Mark.
trenches for a long time and survived.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily, well, I don't think it's necessary of the people or the people who got him in there. I think it's more towards the senior staffs, the generals, who are all idiots, or most of them. And, that's where, I mean, they just kept doing the same thing over and over again. Was it Einstein that said, if you keep doing the same thing, you're insane? And that's what they did over and over and over for 2.5, 3.5 years. It's crazy.
So did the Germans.
Yeah, it's All Quiet on the Western Front exactly calls that, and
And so, yeah, I think both
it's
of you
just
are really,
insane.
yeah, both of you are kind of saying similar things, right? In terms of who is being directed. Certainly in the octet, in the first 8 lines. And then in the second sestet, there is a shift. And where is the shift directed?
It's going from disgust to trying to have some empathy and trying to see beyond the war and feel for everybody who's died, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, excellent.
It feels like the octet.
What?
Sorry, it feels like the octet is in the trenches and the sextet is back at home.
Excellent.
'Cause
I
they're
can't tell you,
talking-
there's just one table slap here after another. Okay. What about the use of language that, first of all, just the first word, always look at the first words, always look at the title. What is an anthem?
It's a rallying cry, isn't it?
It can be a rallying cry. Yeah, sort of a rousing song, like a national anthem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What else is an anthem? This is less known, I think. Any ideas? Think about the poem as a whole. Think about what the poem is contrasting.
Almost like a eulogy.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. It's it's music that's set to a religious reading.
How about a song or a hymn?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So we
Funny you said, oh, sorry, Doc.
No, go.
It's funny you said eulogy, Jenny. The old 10,000 Maniacs song with the same title, it's more of a eulogy than the poem. If you guys go back to the 10,000 Maniacs song from the 90s.
My God, you make these references I don't even understand. But
I love music, and so if you think about the one,
no, you don't know. That's
Yeah.
great. I'll have to look that up. So, okay, so let's start looking at these kinds of contrasts. Look for particular word choice. Okay, look at the first line. What words strike you?
well, cattle, definitely.
You've got
That's World War I in one word.
the simile. These guys are just going to the slaughter. Okay. How about line 2?
The slaughterers were the guns,
The guns, and so
especially the
therefore,
machine guns.
okay, and the guns are therefore personified, right? Because they're angry. The guns.
They're monstrously angry, even.
Oh yeah, double it. Yeah.
That's because, like Mattern said last week, and I've been reading books over the last couple of years, is you have all this brand new weaponry no one ever saw before. It's a bloodbath.
Now let's think of the sound of the poem too. Only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle. After out
Rifle, rifle, rifle.
horizons. What do we have there?
I think that's my favorite line in the poem, just sonically.
Yeah.
When you're
Yes.
reading it, like you're making the same noise of the gun as you're stuttering rifles rapid, like
Rifle's rapid rattle is alliteration. Yeah.
You got alliteration. What else do you have?
That's onomatopoeia too.
Oh, you got onomatopoeia. Oh my God. I am so proud. I am so proud. Okay. So when you look at the next line, what is an horizon?
Prayer.
Yes. So the rifles are pattering out their prayers. Okay. So we're looking at that ironic juxtaposition of religion and funerals to war, right? What do you notice in the next couple of lines? No mockeries now for them. No prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning, save the choirs.
If they cared about them, they wouldn't keep sending them to their deaths.
Good point. Yeah. What else?
They were just cattle, just going in there to get
Were just
chewed
cattle.
up.
Okay. No mockeries.
Yeah. There's a
No
lot of
prayer.
repetition on the no sound.
Excellent.
No,
Okay.
now, no, nor.
Okay. Okay. And then the last line of the last word of line 6, choirs. Choirs of what?
They changed in line 7, they changed the choirs to the sound of the shells coming in, which are all whistled like crazy.
Okay, so and there's that dash, right? Because you stop for a moment with the word choirs, and then you find it. No. Yeah, there are choirs that are mourning back home, but these are the choirs that we hear on the battlefield, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling them from sad shires. What does sad shires refer to?
They're home.
They're home.
Is this what, a township or like a county? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I
little
mean,
villages.
I'm
Like in The
not
Hobbit,
sure.
they live in the Shire.
Exactly. That's all I thought of, Jenny. Was the Hobbit.
I'm right on The
Yeah, and-
Hobbit. They're in the Shire.
So it's
And I
an
mean,
area where a lot of people live, right? Okay. Okay. So
But
there
this
you've
was
got, there
this
you've
was
got
in
the,
France,
say what?
and this was in France,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of shires in France.
Mhm.
So it doesn't necessarily mean it's home. It means it's all the shires, which, I mean, they went into a lot of areas of,
Mm.
the bugles were telling the guys to go over the top, and they were doing it from the back where, you know, they were safe, and the guys going over the top were getting slaughtered.
which
Okay.
is also because like
That's
Lord of the Rings itself was explicitly a response to World War I as well.
say what, please?
Lord of the Rings itself was an explicit response to World War I as well. Like his loss of homeland and industrial, like it's just interesting. Sorry, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, but I won't distract.
We
you
should
more,
do
but,
that.
like,
Yeah.
my daughter's middle name is Eowyn, no joke, but like but that was another novel that was explicitly informed by like his time in the trenches during World War I too. And the naming of the Shire was not accidental, because he references that as like his lost innocence, lost time that was stolen from him from World War I. Sorry for the side effect.
No, that's very good.
Right, but with what you said, Charles, and you, Rachel, Wilfred was, Doc, you said Wilfred was British, so he's saying shires because he's British.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't French, right?
Right.
But
So-
there were French shires.
Right, but that's why he's saying shire. He's British.
And here's the thing. Shires doesn't necessarily mean one thing or the other. It can mean both, right? I mean, that's what, it's kind of what poetry is. Because if you take it to mean to have a British meaning, which certainly it could have. What candles may be held to speed them all? There's the Volta, right? In other words, where in the shires of Britain, after the shires of France, would the candles be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. And then the last three lines. And the thing is that Owen is playing with Shakespearean Petrarchan sonnets because he creates the couplet, right? In their flowers, the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk, a drawing down of blinds. And think about the way think what happens when you pronounce all those D words. Dusk, drawing down blinds. You go down, right? You go down with it. So as the poem ends, where are you?
You're back home. You're the home front, because it's talking about the reactions at home and the goodbyes, the pallor of the girl's brows, and the families drawing down the blinds, saying goodbye to their loved ones. And I don't think the use of the word patient in the dual meanings of patient as in somebody who has been sent home to convalesce is that can't be an accidental double use of the word. Just tender minds that have been damaged by the war.
Okay. Yeah. Really, really good. And of course, the ritual was to close the blinds of any house where a boy or any man had been killed in Britain. I mean, that was just the ritual that took place.
But also, too, each dusk wasn't there the drawing down of blinds because of the bombing that the whole city went dark every night at dusk to keep the Germans from attacking. So they also had that part of it where everybody, as dusk would fall, everything would go dark with the blackout curtains.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, it's kind of like why I love poetry, why I love teaching it. It's a wonderful poem. I think we see all kinds of connections with Maisie. And I'd like to sort of open it up.
I was going to say I can jump to what am I doing
you
here?
folks.
Whoop.
Because, you have the stuff that I natter on about. And you have, stuff from last week. You have questions from last week. But what really struck you this is our last class after all. So what struck you in your final reading of Maisie Dobb?
I'll stop the share so we can see everybody.
Okay.
I was thinking, I think I touched on it a little bit last week, but I think, and obviously what I read, I went down some rabbit holes about Jacqueline Winspear, and obviously the second half is much more sort of a whodunit rather than that. But I almost think, personally, if Jacqueline Winspear hadn't boxed herself into the murder mystery genre, I almost think her books would have been like utterly just so beautifully written. I just feel like, I don't know, she's like a real novelist, sort of like boxing yourself in. Now, granted, Maisie Dobbs went on, she wrote the whole series, and clearly is obviously a name to be, a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the murder mystery genre. But I just think at the end of this story, if she had twisted it differently and just made it like a love story like Hemingway would do, and obviously, Doc, you love Farewell to Arms, and I just feel like if she had gone that route, I just think that this book would be so much more of like a blockbuster. It's incredible and really well written, but I think if she just let go of the whole murder mystery thing, to me, Jacqueline Winspear would have been something totally different. But
Well,
That's neither here nor there.
say what?
That's just my opinion.
Yes,
I still took it that way, Derek. I still cried at the end.
Look at you.
Come on, man.
Look at you. You're getting a table slap for crying, man.
Well, seriously though, I mean, you're like, oh my God, there he is. He's sitting there and she's there, and you're like, holy smokes. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it's, I mean, to me, it's irrefutable. She is such a superior writer to Doyle or Christie. I mean, it's not even like there's no.
It's not even close. It's not even the same ballpark.
They might have styled their mysteries well, but she's in another category. I mean, other comments.
a few weeks ago, I thought about this. You talked about the wallowing in psychology. I mean, she does. I mean, she's writing as a current writer, so you're looking at PTSD. The guy leading the whole harangue on that guy. I mean, it was it was deep. He was dealing with mental health from all of them. So she was wallowing in psychology. I suppose the other guy's not.
Yeah, and Maurice, of course, is her mentor. And he's pushing that on. Well, not pushing, but he's teaching her that.
Yeah.
I also thought about, oops.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, you're there.
No. I just also thought about the eyes. You brought up the eyes before her eyes. And she looks at people and looks into their eyes, and that whole idea that was coming up of your eyes are the heart to your soul. But also in the beginning of her book, she has the excerpt from Disabled also by Wilfred Owen. And that whole poem is like, no one looks at me now, that whole thing. And it was very much to me like the ending of the book when she's with the doctor there in the when they're there together. That whole thing of now I'm deformed and no one's going to look at me anymore. I'm not the handsome man that went off to the war and everything like that.
And all those girls in the anthem.
Yeah.
What are they dealing with?
Yeah. And I do think she sees people, she never looks away from people, whether they're disfigured or
exactly
struggling. She sees them, and that really makes a difference.
Except the one person that mattered the most to her, because that was the first time she had visited him.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about how, like, throughout the book, she can do no wrong, but then at the end, there's this shock of like, oh, she's human, and she really messed up there. It was a bit. I mean, I guess we should have seen it coming that he was alive at the end, because if you don't see the body, then they're probably alive. But it was really shocking that, like, she knew something was going to go wrong, and she still put off his proposals over and over again. And it made me feel like, oh, yikes, that's pretty rough. Yeah.
Elizabeth, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
Where are you speaking from? Kendall and I spent at least 5 minutes on Friday talking about the background of.
I live in a log cabin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said that.
Yeah. I'm in the Hudson Valley.
Okay, cool. Okay. That's that. Are you satisfied, Kendall? I'm sure.
Kendall's not even answering that.
I know. Well, that's I get used to that. Okay, other comments?
I was appreciative that you get the hero's journey through Maisie Dobbs, and I appreciated that development, but it actually led me to thinking about the Doyle and whether that is almost a perversion of the hero's journey, because the hero or the murderer in that case ultimately does, wrong to fulfill their journey. And it also made me think about free will and culpability as both being another theme between those two books. It made me appreciate Doyle more the more I was thinking about it after writing off the book a little bit.
Very cool. Okay. Other observations that you guys want to make, before we go to some of my tired old questions? Come on, you've been thinking about
I think that she took a lot of modern interpretations of medicine and psychology and applied it back at the wartime. So I don't think it could have been written contemporaneously with what was going on.
it. That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah, it is a kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, right? Just because we know things now, or we can explore things now, or define things now that we couldn't, or that people could not at the time.
Right. The whole concept of the psychology of deformity and how people react to it. The cultism of a leader who can have people following them, even though it's bizarre things he's recommending. Her interpretation of psychology, the body image, mimicking is a way to react and gain confidence of the person you're interviewing. It's a lot of things that we know now that were not, I don't think were known then, although there was certainly literature from contemporaneously about the psychological stuff of the war and the shell shock problems.
I think it must have been very, though, at the time, even the deformities of people's faces and not being able to make eye contact. It's sort of what you think about when you see homeless people downtown and people look away and don't look at them and they don't make eye contact. They, keep walking. And when these men were like missing jaws and noses and eyes and their faces were so deformed, I think for a lot of people, it was terribly difficult to make any kind of an eye contact with them. And they came up with, obviously these masks were poorly, they were a step up from where they were, but they weren't great. And it must have been interesting. I could totally see that whole concept of the retreat, of going somewhere where people weren't going to be staring at you or not staring at you, like not wanting to look at you and not wanting your family or loved ones to see you. Similar to Maisie not showing up for Simon for several years after knowing he was there. She wouldn't go see him. All these other men didn't want their loved ones. They knew they didn't want to see them either. And to go away to that retreat was sort of interesting. It's a shame that the Adam Jenkins guy was, unhinged over the whole, idea of desertion and was killing people off. And of course, cleverly, signing over their money as well. But I think at the time, people must have realized how hard that was to have so many deformed people from the war. I don't think it's a lot different from like Vietnam, when people came back and the war wasn't popular and nobody wanted to see them because nobody wanted us to be in the war. So they got no sympathy, not like World War II, where people, held them up as heroes. To be deformed in a war that nobody was even supporting must have been difficult.
I think also from the novelistic standpoint, Maisie, despite some minor flaws, seems a little too angelic until then. Where she's clearly, seen, it's like, well, why the hell did you not see this man?
Yeah, she does shock and awe you with that.
Say what?
She does shock and awe you with that. You're like, oh, she's so great, and then whoa, no, she's not.
Yeah, and that from a standpoint of like, a novelist creating around characters, kind of important, right? Yeah.
So does Simon Lynch play a role in the future books? Does she continue to visit him?
She does. She does continue to see him. And sees his mother more often, who also would have liked to have seen her because she knew him, back when. Because so few people, a lot of these people, when they go to visit, nobody's coming to see them, not even their families, they stop coming. But he does continue on with that. And I have to say, plowing through these books in a row, she does other things that will shock you as well if you keep reading. She has this thing where, she doesn't always see clearly what she's doing. She thinks she's doing the right thing sometimes and she's not. And then other times you just are like, what the heck are you thinking, Maisie? Like, why would you do that? She's an interesting character because as she develops throughout the books, you'll, see more. But Simon's certainly in it more. Of course, Billy's in there. There's more of Maurice. Khan, you get to learn more about Khan, who she does, the meditation and learns more. So that Eastern philosophy with him. And how that influences her work and what she thinks.
I also think that Simon was used as part of the suspense of the story. When the time of the event, you said, what happened to him? And where was he? And what, where was she and where was he. So it was, in addition to what was happening to the dead people, it was where was he and what had happened with that. So it was a little suspenseful too.
Other comments?
I
Going
wanted
back
to see.
to the eyes and looking directly into them, if you look for things that people interpret as honesty and when you're trying to tell the truth about something, someone who's diverting their eyes and not looking straight at you, it's a clue as to honesty and truthfulness. So she was using that technique to interview better and reassure the person she was talking to that she was going to be straight with them.
Good point. Good point. I heard a voice. Another.
I wanted to see what you guys thought about her, like her ability to almost like she's so insightful, but then she also it almost goes so far that she has like a sixth sense kind of thing where she is like foreseeing the future.
Okay.
One other point I want to make is the amount of time discussing the phone connection, the phone booth and how she connected. If you look at our modern technology, it's absurd, but she must have gone back and researched what kind of communications existed at that point and how could they communicate and still be timely oriented.
I mean, it's just beautifully researched. I mean, I think that, in a way, it may not be the most accurate way to view World War I, but as Kendall mentioned me to last week during our weekly Zoom, a lot of people view or see in World War I, say, poetry, a more accurate version of World War I than in history, or they'll look at the poetry for the history, right? And in a way, in this book, she has the kind, Winspear has the distinct advantage of dealing with things that happened, decades before, right?
Right. She had grandparents in the war, so, that were part of the war. So she had that family history to lean on. But as to what Hillary said too, you definitely get the feel that she has a sixth sense, that there is something to her. It's part of her dark eyes, her vision, her physical appearance and things. And that comes up more later. She definitely has a sixth sense and feeling about things. She's very intuitive. And I think that helps her read people, the psychology. Just when I was talking in the beginning about her mirroring, when she would mirror people's movements, it suddenly attuned her and she would know things about them that I'm sure I could try to stand the way you're standing and I still wouldn't know one thing you were thinking. But she would definitely pick up, on what people were thinking and how they were feeling by aligning her body with theirs. But she definitely has a sixth sense. And I think that's what they picked up on at the very beginning when they started educating her, that there was just something about her that was going to lend her to be, spectacular at this work, not just being a investigator, but a psychologist and investigator, because she has that real sense of people.
Can I interrupt and
Of
go
course.
back to Charles's comment about communication? Interestingly enough, yes, the telephone was just breaking in. Very few people, as she indicates, had phones, and only very wealthy. But every pub at this point had a phone, and every neighborhood had at least one pub. So that's where you went to make your calls. And the pub was just hugely important for information of all sorts and conversations. And also, there were 2 mailings a day still. That's going to continue into the 20s. And because railroads ran so frequently, you could write a letter in London in the morning and it could get by train to Kent or even a little further out by the afternoon for the second delivery. So communications were pretty good within a certain realm at that time.
I was actually fascinated by that, how she sends out a note in the morning and people are answering her note in the afternoon. I said, I can mail a letter today and it won't get there till, a week later. And it's like, did you get my mail? You can't get a birthday card out on time. And yet then they were able, with that twice a day post, people were getting responses right away, because when she didn't have a phone in her office right away, I'll just send a card and get an answer. I did think that was interesting that, in a long, however many 100 years or whatever it's been, we haven't done better with mail communication. Has gotten worse.
No, we're actually talking about going down to 3 times a day, 3 times a week, both here and in England.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't even realize that, but that's an interesting part. The other thing I meant to mention too, in language, is the whole idea with Billy Bill talking about the dog and bone telephone, like the words they would make up to rhyme that would symbolize something else that was very current at that time. I love that they brought that in.
It's kind of interesting you talked about
the
the telephone system. In my travels in the Navy in the Mediterranean, a lot of the countries there, until the cell phone came out, if you wanted to make a call, you went down to the local exchange. Because I can remember calling back home. You have to go someplace in a city or something, in a town. I can also remember getting up to 3 deliveries in Philadelphia back in the 50s. So,
wow,
yeah, the mail service isn't like anything now. But that was within the city.
When we look at the novel itself, how do we see Winspear developing, for good or ill, as a mystery author?
Well, I wanted to talk about that because it seems like the only true linear mystery is what's happening at the retreat. But she creates a ton of mystery by the structure, starting at one point, and you're wondering, well, why is this happening? Why is this important to her? And then retracting, and then moving forward again and back again. So that's where like most of the mystery comes from. As a reader, you're wondering, what did I miss? What happened to create, this situation? The mystery of the retreat is almost like, it's like, okay.
Uh-huh. So say more about that, Elizabeth. That's really kind of a cool thing.
I mean, it's just the structure and the storytelling. She made choices that created mystery where there wasn't any if it had been told linearly.
Okay.
I thought she did have sort of the mystery of Vincent, like what was with Vincent? Like that's what sort of edge to the, this person buried with just a single name on their grave from the very first case. And then you're wondering, why does that mean anything? And then it all ties into the retreat by the time we're done, like, because she goes away from it. Because you find out that, Vincent isn't, you don't know what that is about Vincent. And she sort of drops that when they go back to her past and then pick it up again. And then suddenly it's James thinking about going to the retreat. And then she's like, wasn't that where Vincent was? Or that all seems to be the same place.
I agree with Elizabeth. Like the whole structure kind of made me uneasy and suspicious about things that maybe weren't like, I don't know if anyone else did, but the whole time I thought Frankie Dobbs was going to die. Like almost every time they brought him up after a certain point, I was like, oh no, oh no. I was just like bracing myself for that. But it never happened.
And you do love Frankie.
Oh, Frankie's awesome.
He was too good. Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah. Okay. So he's too good to live almost, right? Yeah.
You do worry whether, everybody's going to make it, through each time, because people, with the war, it's so uncertain. So people get killed. Like her friend Enid, she has lunch and then boom, Enid's literally boom, gone. And you're like, what? That she was like a huge character and she's out of there. And you do worry constantly because it's in a state of war. But you're right, that builds suspense in itself. Like who's going to make it to the end of this book?
It's an interesting thing about the Maisie Dobbs series, because I think Winspear has a real gift of appealing to our hearts. More so than Christie, more so than and again, it's not necessarily a part of the mystery genre, but I think it's a big thing about Winspear, And in terms of mystery, when you think about it, any novel, any good novel worth its salt is a mystery. You're always looking for how things turn out, right? I mean, and you're always being hinted at as the novel progresses. And she just happens to include, elements of the mystery genre to write her novel and to explore the way ultimately the mysteries in her characters are revealed.
Is Billy Beale supposed to be the sidekick? Is that kind of how it played? Right?
Yeah.
That's what I kind of feel.
Yes.
Yeah, like Billy Beale is the sidekick.
Right. He becomes her side. I mean, he starts as her helper and becomes her
Right.
sidekick.
And why is he important as a sidekick? I mean, what is his background that makes him?
Well, he was a soldier. He was there on the front lines.
And keep going.
Well, he was the last person that they operated on before, the big explosion that hurt her and Lynch.
Excellent. Okay, so I mean, there's a deep plot connection there.
Right. He's the connection to the doctor that she was in love with. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also her entrance into worlds that she could not go to. It kind of goes back to like the Cockney rhyming slang, which is a huge class indicator of the language that he uses. Maisie kind of was a scullery maid, but she kind of now flirts with higher, more of the upper class, whereas Billy very clearly, by the way he speaks, the way he moves, is more, I don't want to compare him to like the Basil Street Irregulars, but he kind of is a little bit more of that informal world that Maisie probably couldn't use to go get intel or to go find things out or to go get information. And by virtue of him being a sapper, he is pretty smart and clever and has a technical knowledge that he got from the world that would be pretty useful in general.
I also just see him as Maisie's foil. He's all emotion and sunniness, and he's tactile, and she's more thoughtful and reserved and quiet and cerebral. And so they balance each other out in a way that is probably important for a sidekick and a protagonist.
Excellent. Excellent.
Right. I think I looked at, I made like a little chart here because I'm a nerd again, with like all the different comparisons between the books. But just when I had one of my categories was sidekicks. But when you think about like Watson, he's like in awe of Holmes and worshiping at the altar of Holmes, and everything he does is amazing. And then you have Hastings, who at times says he's smarter than Poirot, and he can't believe Poirot actually is going to do this because he knows what's going on now. But when you have Billy Beale, he's somebody who's totally devoted to Maisie. Like Maisie saved his life according to her, and he's just devoted to her and there to help her in any way and not judge her or criticize what she's doing, but just to be a total support. And so it makes I think it's a nicer relationship with her sidekick, because not only is he there to help her, and I think because obviously her father was a costermonger, she grew up in a very poor section of town, and did not have anything, but she's still a female in the 1920s, and she needs Billy Beale because there's a lot of places she can't go as a woman that he can go, as evidenced right away by this very first thing. She couldn't very well go in the retreat and hang out, which he could, but there are definitely places he can go that she can't.
And he goes to the local pub regularly, right?
Right.
Well, I'll find out.
It's also a reminder to her where her roots are. And that continues throughout the novels. It's an ongoing, I think, important theme.
It is the whole class theme. And for her, it's a huge thing as it goes through.
How do we see that develop in the novel? The class thing, because it's very important.
I know for myself, when I first started reading it, I was like, oh, look, this is upstairs, downstairs, you know, in a mystery, or Downton Abbey in a mystery, because it was so Downton Abbey with the, you know, the people in the kitchen and the butler, and she's all part of that crew. And then there's the other people, you know, upstairs. And it was interesting because you have Maisie then, who's, you know, in one category and starts to move to another, and how difficult it is. And you have Enid, the same Enid and James, who are also showing the class thing. You know, Enid's a maid, and there's no way James Compton, who's going to, you know, eventually be Lord Compton, is ever going to be able to marry the maid in the house. That's crazy. You know, they can't even think that such a thing could happen.
By the way, they're in conversation to have a new season of Downton Abbey. Just thought I'd throw that out.
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
I thought the same thing, Ginny, but then the that going back in time sort of shattered it, because like she worked her way up, let's just say, for example. I mean, it very much just broke it down. I mean, she was a nurse, she saw this, her youth, her dad, like, yeah, I mean, it just shattered it completely. And then you go into it and it's just, you know.
Right, what that was similar to Down.
No, go.
No, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just saying, similar to Downton Abbey, where you saw, you know, World War I broke down a lot of barriers between the classes, because once you've all gone off and had family killed, and you're all serving on the lines together, you know, suddenly class doesn't seem as important. But for a lot of people, it still is important, you know, where people are and who you'll talk to and who you'll be with. I think Frankie Dobbs, you know, is the same way. He's busy, you know, helping Lady Rowan, and how formal everybody is, you know, with one another, how they, you know, refer to each other. It's very interesting, I think, as you follow that, and those things, you know, barriers don't start to break down. Even in World War II, they're, you know, they're still there. The whole class idea, you know, the wealthier the officers, and
still there today.
Yeah.
They are.
I think it's an abomination that Maisie Dobbs has not been made into a PBS series.
It will be.
I mean, it's
it
like,
will be.
Well, it has to be. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I've like researched to see, you know, I've gone all over the internet. Is this going to be a PBS series? It's got to be. Like,
apparently, Hillary Clinton has the rights to the books.
She does.
Does she? Oh, well, there you go. So
who else she'll come through? She and Chelsea will come through. I hope so.
Doc, I worry about you sometimes.
I appreciate that. And I think, you know, there's probably a good reason for anybody to worry. But I wanted to point out.
I should never have shared these.
I wanted to point out one thing, you know, regarding just the opening of the novel, where you have that Jack Barker, the you know, the newspaper seller, looking at her, slender woman in the navy blue thigh-length jacket with a matching pleated skirt, short enough to reveal a well-turned ankle. She had what his old mother would have called bearing, and he assumes that she's part of the upper crust. And then the minute she starts speaking, he realizes, oh my God, she's one of us. She's one of us. And that's a sort of like a cool, to me, a cool tension that exists in the character of Maisie Dobbs between those two worlds, you know, and also you know, helps define her father and many other characters. And what do you make of the whole family where she worked, I mean, we really haven't talked about that. Where do they stand, Comptons?
can I also just mention to us, thing you said about Jack Barker, that she finishes with Jack Barker as well on the last page of the book. She starts with him on the first page, excellent, and she finishes with him on the last page, with her coming back and waving to Jack Barker from the MG as she comes in. I thought that was interesting, that's a character that only appears on the first page and the last page and doesn't have anything to do with it.
I also think that's one of her, you know, unique techniques. She will revisit incidents, characters from earlier in the novel, and then bring them up just briefly as she goes through.
That will be great for the movie.
Go ahead, Hillary.
Yeah, no, it's coming. You're coming full circle. It's a good visual.
It's a great visual. You open with that scene and you close with that scene.
Yeah. I mean, how else do you find these? I mean, because I find that one of the appeals of Maisie Dobbs is the visual element, and that's part of the reason why, I guess, why I say, oh, why isn't this PBS series? But how has the visual elements affected you as a reader, and say versus the visual elements of both Doyle and Christie?
We talked about that, like, what, 3 weeks ago, where we said, yeah, I mean, those were very short books, and there's not a lot of real estate to sort of establish all that. Here she does. You can visualize everything very, very well. I mean, she does it.
I think it brings you into the story. It's very immersive, the way that she describes how everything looks, and I really enjoyed reading this because she brings you into the story as much as possible, and in so many different ways. And I wanted to sneak this in there, along with the imagery and just like the blue dress, that the way that she writes, the way that it kind of goes, back and forth between, the present and the past, is very similar to how humans live their everyday lives, where it's like it isn't linear. You always kind of jump back and think about something in the past, and it brings you back to the present. And I think it also, further immerses you into the lives of people who have suffered through war and who go through things like PTSD and, shell shock and things like that, where it's like, it's never far away. And I just wanted to comment, because I was, reading through the questions, and like the difference between, the linearity of, from beginning to end, going all the way through. If you had read it like that, straight from, the moment that her mother died all the way to, going and seeing Captain Lynch, it wouldn't affect you the same way that it would as if it had gone from, the present to the past, the present to the past. I just think she's really great at bringing the reader into the story along with Maisie.
It's funny you said that, Sarah. I had a friend who survived Iraq in a former company I worked at, and he had a mine blow up his Humvee, and he was a GIS guy, and he would go, we would talk all the time, and he said, just like you said, he would go back and forth. His story's harrowing and insane, but it's in him, and he's the only guy who survived, and so he just goes back and forth. It was crazy you said that. Yeah.
Wow. That was really, really smart, Sarah.
Thanks.
I table slapper, Doc.
You got a double, okay? I can't just keep on being promiscuous with these table slaps. Yeah, that's a really good point. Other comments? You guys have been great. I mean, you've come up with all sorts of things to talk about without my blathering on.
I'd like to just say this. I went down, instead of murder mystery, then I started looking at WW1 novels. And this probably it's not probably a question for Kendall, but I'd pose it to Kendall, saying, Johnny Got His Gun. You've read that book, I take it?
Yep. There's a lot of very good World War I literature.
I think it's funny. I looked, and they published that book on September 3rd, 1939. An anti-war, you see what I'm saying here? World War II started September 1st, 1939. I just think that's incredible that book was published, an anti-war book about World War I, saying this really stinks. And then here we go with WW2. But also, to bring it back to Music for Ethan, it got me down the Metallica rabbit hole. And then one is an awesome song by Metallica, if you don't know it. And it's all about taking clips from Johnny Got His Gun when they made the movie in 1971. So if you want to check that out, you can check out the video for Metallica's One, which is based on the clips from Johnny got his gun.
Oh, Master of Puppets, dude.
That's Injustice for All, but yes.
Oh my God, I feel so.
It's like they're speaking a foreign language.
Well, no, you've all
I
seen,
feel
all
ignorant.
of you have seen Stranger Things. In the last episode, Billy's jamming to Master of Puppets. You all know the
Okay,
song.
I have seen
There you
Stranger
go.
Things. You are right there.
I'll bring
At
it
least
back
I've
for
watched that.
Yeah.
And
With
now
what you
you'll
said,
go and
Derek-
watch Metallica's One, and you'll see clips from Johnny Got His Gun.
Yeah.
I'll have to put that on my YouTube and find
With
it.
what Derek said about books, though, is something I just read in the last month that we all like Maisie Dobbs. Kendall, you might have read this. It's called The Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel. Amazing book. Like, if all of us like Kendall talking about the weapons and how it's the arms race combined with Rudolph Diesel invented the diesel engine. Like, I mean, I'm a car guy, and I didn't realize, like, it's amazing how the diesel engine literally changed the world in like a million ways. But he went missing, and I won't ruin the book. Everybody should read it. It is a amazing book. It's amazing.
Oh,
it is good.
Good for this class because it's World War One. It's a mystery, and it's just ties in so many things in the world that's just like you didn't learn in school.
We only have so much time, Ethan.
We're reaching the end of this adventure. And I remember my dad lived till he was over 100, and I used to ask him, "So what is it that that keeps you going?" And he said, "Well, it's because every day there's something new to learn." And I think with you guys, I've learned a lot. I mean, Ethan, you and your musical references. I mean, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but I'm going to look it up.
I had a music or a radio show in college, and so I did every genre literally, except, well, a little rap, but like everything else, jazz, classical, pop, everything. And so I got to know stuff my dad taught me, but then even just other stuff. It was a crazy radio show, so I've always liked music. Yeah.
So I guess this is it. I've had a hell of a good time.
Yeah, I can't thank you all enough for joining us every week for this. It's been terrific. Just enjoying it. If you love Maisie Dobbs, I encourage you to read on. It's definitely entertaining and more things happen.
And if you've read all 17 like I have, number 18 is coming out in June, and I have the Amazon. I've already pre-ordered it on Amazon, so I'm going to
17 books, you said? Holy smokes.
There's 17 out right now. I'm on 16, so I've only got one more to go before the June release of the other one to finish up. But you'll go from World War I into World War II, because I think that's something I spent a lot of time thinking about, what that generation must have been like, Maisie Dobbs' generation, to have lived through World War I and World War II, like to go through this horrendous war,
huge issue,
people injured, and then being back in it again must have been unbelievable. Kendall?
Since you brought that up, there's a whole new historical school now going on, and it's fascinating. It's just about 5 years old. They're now calling it the European Civil War, and it goes from 1914 to 1945.
Wow!
So it's bringing out some very interesting, controversial interpretations of the standard history. So, but those are the rabbit holes I jump into.
But imagine living through that period. Must have been unbelievable to be through 2 wars of that magnitude.
And that's in the book Blood and Ruins. I just started it, Kendall.
Did you? Okay.
What is Blood and Ruins?
That's basically, I actually have it in my pile over here. It's Richard Overy, who's basically doing what Kendall said. It's taking it from like the early 1900s until 1950s.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This was terrific, and we hope to see you again at another course. And Heather, thank you for all your help.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I'll post the this recording, and then I'll share with you the whole playlist, so you can go back and check anything out.
And we'll be in touch about anything about the next time.
Yeah, and baseball, and we got upcoming baseball season, everybody.
So please do it. I said that to Kendall. I've had a lot of alums ask about another baseball session.
Doc and I are talking about the Negro Leagues.
Yeah.
A short session.
That'd be awesome. Awesome.
Right. We'll work on
it. Yeah, it's very awesome. Cool.
When you're retired, there's so damn much things things to think about. you know?
Even when you're not retired.
Well, I know, but when you're retired, I mean, nobody can tell you like, oh, well, you can't tell anybody. Oh, well, you know, I'm just too busy. I mean, you guys like work for a living, most of you. You know, like you actually have like lives.
Yeah, but as a scientist, all of this is better than doing science all day.
Thank you. All
No,
right.
seriously. I mean, it's like you're like enough of this.
Thank you all very much. We're going to get
Thank
off
you
here
so
so Heather
much.
can
We'll,
go to sleep. She's got a big night tomorrow night.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you
Good
guys.
night.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Love
Good
you.
to see you all.
Thank you.